This is A Geek Leader. Hey guys, John Roldan back with Geek Leader, episode 25, and today's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to be doing an interview today with Anthony Roldan at HubSpot, and he's here to talk about culture and the importance of culture in our companies and in hiring decisions. And HubSpot has a very unique culture, and I was kind of blown away with all the things that they do. And we focus a lot on autonomy. And if you've heard me talk about leadership and motivation, you know autonomy is one of my big points. So I want to get right into this with Anthony. I hope you enjoy it, and be sure to check out the show notes at ageekleader.com/episode 25. Hey guys, this is John Roldan from A Geek Leader and ageekleader.com, and I've got Anthony Roldan from HubSpot to talk to us a little bit about autonomy and leadership and culture, and how culture is just super important in growing a business and recruiting people and just building a perfect team. So Anthony, if you would just go ahead and spend about 5 or 6 minutes just telling us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Anthony Roldan. I'm a tech lead on our engineering culture and engagement team at HubSpot, which is kind of a wacky job title, I think, or at least it gets a lot of eyebrow raises as I talk to people about it. And I've been here at HubSpot about 4 years. I started as our first engineer working on our mobile apps, worked on a couple of our other products as well, and then pretty recently transitioned into this new role, leading up our engineering culture team. And I think what that means, culture team gets a lot of is this some tech bubbly insanity? But I think it's my team looks critically at the culture that we have, looks at the culture that we want to have. We have a culture code deck that sort of espouses the culture that we believe HubSpot has and should continue to have. And so my role is looking out for that culture, looking at places where maybe we're not living up to it, places where we could be doing even better, specifically in the context of people. So how can we make sure that our team has opportunities to continue to grow? How do we make sure that the candidates that we talk to in the recruiting process have access to the right materials that tell our story really well? And then how do we make sure that when people come in the door, that we onboard them effectively, that they're feel welcome, that they can integrate into the company?
Okay, so you got to tell me a little bit about how you transitioned from developing software to developing culture.
Yeah, so I'd been sort of lightly involved, I guess, in a bunch of different cultural aspects over time. And everyone is involved in cultural aspects all the time, right? You can't.
Right.
You're going to have a culture whether you talk about it or not. But I had been running we have a weekly Tech Talk seminar series, and I had been running that, which is finding people on the team who have a technical story to share. Maybe it's a new technology, a process, a tool, something like that. Helping them through turning that into a deck. I think a lot of engineers myself included, hate public speaking. And so it's
yeah, here you are.
Yeah, right. So it's pulling teeth to get that going a lot of the times, but it's really rewarding, and it's a huge asset to the team. So I've been running that. I had been pretty active on our social steering committee, which organizes a lot of the fun stuff that we do around the office, which I think is actually really important to our culture and the way that we structure our teams. And so I had done that, and basically, one of our VPs said to me, I see you've been doing all this stuff. Have you considered that this role that we hadn't arrived on the term engineering culture and engagement yet, but it was sort of like, it seems like your skills and your interests line up with sort of this world, the things you're already doing. You formed a lot of relationships with the team. Since I worked on mobile, I got to work with a lot of tech leads and product managers and teams and people across the organization, across a bunch of our products. Mm-hmm. So I had that experience and the trust with people. So this VP sort of pitched me pretty hard on this role. And so I started that in November, and it's been interesting since then. And it's I think it's interesting too how I think it's not it is engineering, right? Building a culture and being careful about that. It's not hard engineer, and not hard. I mean, not that it's not difficult, but it's not hard, and that success isn't always as clear as when you're deploying software.
Right. You don't have requirements for culture, right?
Right. Or, we have I guess what we call guardrails, right? We have a direction that we know we want to go in. But, thinking in those constraints, thinking how can we use our resources best effectively? How can we equip everyone with cultural resources? But those can mean a lot of different things. It's interesting. I think it's as core a part of our team as any of our, say, technical infrastructure teams.
Yeah, absolutely. It's probably definitely just as important to the bottom line as well, not just the what's really important, the people, but also the bottom line.
Yeah.
So when you got in this role as engineering culture, was there already kind of a culture in place, or was it something that you guys tried to develop and create, or did you just kind of formalize it and document it, or how was the process?
Well, I think of course we had a culture in place, and I think it's sort of as we've been growing, HubSpot's been growing really aggressively. I think we've been growing by 50% year over year in terms of employees. Right when I started, we were about 300 people, and now we're almost 1,100 people.
Oh, wow.
So really rapid growth, and I think we basically we wanted to make sure that there were people explicitly looking out for this kind of thing as we grew, because I think it's a lot easier to have to maintain a culture. Everyone's on the same page. In my last company, which was 10 people, right? We all knew the culture, and it was just us. Whereas in an engineering organization of 200 people, it's right. There are going to be subcultures within that. There's going to be and there can be drifts. If you're not being careful about it. And we wanted to really make sure that as we grow, we're not sacrificing the things that made HubSpot and continue to make HubSpot great.
Okay, can you tell us just a little bit for anybody that doesn't know, what is HubSpot? What do you guys do? What service and products do you guys offer?
Yeah, absolutely. So HubSpot provides we have two big lines of products. Our main product that's been around since we were founded is the HubSpot all-in-one marketing platform. And so the idea there is we want to provide tools to help small to medium-sized businesses market online really effectively. So a lot of companies, right, can cobble together some combination of if you're a small business and you want to set up shop online, you set up a WordPress blog, you put Google Analytics on there, you put in Wufoo forms or some Google Docs forms to start collecting people who collecting emails from people who visit your site. Then you'll plug that into a MailChimp campaign. You'll set up a Hootsuite account, and so what we really think we saw is that marketers, tying all those tools together to me sounds like a lot of fun because I'm a developer, but to marketers, tying all those tools together sounds like a nightmare. And so we provide a platform that integrates tools like that in all those segments, so that marketers can focus on marketing and build all of their marketing campaigns around a single contacts database. So that means that you can customize the content on your website. You can use the same contact list in social media and email all really easily without having to tie stuff together.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really cool.
And then more recently, we've been branching out into sales products as well. So the idea with our marketing products, we want to enable people to do what we call inbound marketing. So the idea is that yesterday, and I mean that figuratively, in the past, marketers had a lot of power. They controlled the information about whatever products a company was selling. And whereas now consumers, do their research online, they proactively look for products on their own terms. And we want to empower business to market inbound. So the way that you get found isn't with billboards, it's not with radio ads, it's not with TV ads anymore, right? It's you have a compelling website, you create compelling content, and people find you.
Yeah, it's definitely all about content and content marketing, and I'm a huge fan of that. And I try to explain to people. Sometimes they'll say, "Well, why do I need a website? I can just get an ad on TV or a billboard." And I said, "Well, how many TV commercials do you actually watch unless it's the Super Bowl? You usually fast forward through them all, and nobody's looking at billboards. They're either driving or looking at their phone, or hopefully not both." So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so content's king for sure.
And so we've been branching out into sales tools, and we want to bring that same inbound philosophy to sales, which I think you sort of already see when you go to buy a car now. As you go to the dealership, as much as the salesperson about the car. You're not looking to them for information anymore. You're looking to salespeople to tell you, to sort of they see a lot of problems, and that you want them to help you discover problems and discover products that maybe you weren't aware of. But you're not just looking. The advantage, they don't have a information advantage anymore. So how do people sell in that world where it's more of a consultative sale? And so we're building this whole new suite of sales tools. We have a free CRM and tools that integrate with your email to let you know when people read them and when they've engaged with content you've sent them as a salesperson. And so that's sort of the next frontier of products that we're working on.
Oh, awesome. And I guess since you're growing at that pace and offering these new, I guess this new core product line called, for your sales teams, how important is it to make sure you bring in the right people?
It's incredibly important. So the way that we structure our teams is we have generally about 3 engineers, a technical lead, a product manager, and a designer, and that's a whole team that works on. We try to have them work on a vertical slice of the product. So, for example, the team that built our CRM, which they built in a matter of months, was that model. It was a handful of engineers, a product manager, and a designer, and so we have these small teams building products that are other companies have an entire company built around that product.
And do you guys do agile development, or?
We let each team pick what they want to do. I think I've heard it described as agile with a lowercase a. So we definitely don't do waterfall style development. We're very flexible, but we also don't. You're
not just like a strictly Scrum team or something like that. You allow your teams to have autonomy and freedom to choose.
Yeah, we don't stick to sprints. We give each team the freedom to organize however they want to do. Because I think when you're working on a greenfield project, the way that you want to run your team looks a lot different from when you're working on something that might has tens or hundreds of thousands of users already.
So it's almost like each team is kind of their own business, their own company.
Yeah, to a degree. And so, right, in the same way that if you have a 6-person startup, you're going to make sure that every single person on that team is amazing. And we feel the same way about the people on our teams.
Right, you have to make sure everybody's bringing value and nobody's bringing down the team, and everyone works together well and has a really cohesive and family-like environment.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you sent me before we talked was this HubSpot culture code. Can you go over that a little bit? Because I think that was just absolutely fascinating, and I got really excited when I saw that and just kind of read through it, that that you guys put into words what I think most people want their companies to be.
Yeah, it is definitely an aspirational deck. It's our CTO Dharmesh put this together a few years back when he was basically wanted to share the story of and share what we think about HubSpot, how we think about how the company is structured, and it's built around a few principles, which I can go through.
I've got it up right here. Number 1 is we commit manically to both our mission and our metrics.
Yeah, so that's basically we want everyone who's here to be really on board, not just aware of, but really make sure that the mission that they have, maybe that's our high level mission as a company or the smaller mission that each team has, but we want the context is key to what you're doing, right? We really want to have an eye out for our customers because you make a ton of decisions all the time, and having that context means you can make those micro decisions much more effectively.
Yeah, I actually heard Gary Vaynerchuk talking, and he said, what we just talked about earlier is that content is king, but context is God. And knowing that your context, will help you make all your decisions, and it makes almost, your day-to-day life so much easier if you know the context that you're working in.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, and number 2 is we look to the long term and solve for the customer.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that the sort of the bullet point there says it all. We really, when we're thinking about how we want to build products, we always start with the customer value we're delivering. And I think that this isn't something that it's not just the domain of product managers or product leaders to know that. It's everyone saying, I think it would be better for customers if we did X. And I think it also means taking a long-term view, right? So there's things that you can do to try to, I think if you can see it, sometimes see it if, when people are optimizing for vanity metrics, you see, I'm trying to think of, evil stuff online, maybe deceptive marketing that could give you a short-term boost.
Yeah, like
that kind of thing.
The black hat SEO type stuff.
Yeah, and that could be solving for a short-term goal, but long-term that's going to erode trust with customers. And as an organization, that's not a world we want to live in.
Right. Absolutely. The next one is we share openly and are remarkably transparent. Yeah,
so this is a huge one. I mean, I think there's always this. And and it's mentioned in the culture code, there's always something that sort of powerfully tries to regress to the mean. As an organization grows, you want to regress to the mean, where it's easy to say, oh, shoot, is this something we shouldn't share? Is this a secret that we have to keep? And we're always fighting against that instinct and basically saying, everything that we can default to being open, we're going to do that. So every employee here has full access to our company financials, to our strategy documents, to the minutes from our executive team's meetings. And we want everyone to have the opportunity to see that context and really believe that if you share and people are going to be better informed, they're going to be more about it, and we want everyone to feel like they really own they own HubSpot, that they're not just here collecting a paycheck.
Yeah, and I know a lot of CTOs and CIOs just got really nervous when you said something like that they have open access to financials and all that stuff, because I know out of most companies that stuff's kept really tight, and really, really locked down. What kind of feedback do you get when you tell people about how open that is?
I think people are, internally people are incredibly excited about it. I think it's really motivating, and it means that if you have a question about the numbers or a question about the mission of your team, you can back out, you can see yourself how that fits into the larger mission, instead of sort of being guessing or playing some political game to say, I think my team should have more resources or more budget or something. It's all out there for you to see.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic, because I've been in environments before where they were doing big cuts and budget cuts, and people were getting all nervous. And if we could actually see the books, you'd see that there's really nothing to worry about. The only reason they're cutting things back is because they want to reallocate it to a new business venture, something new that's coming down the line that no one, they haven't publicly let on to everybody. But there's a sense of fear that gets developed because people don't know, and they always assume the worst. And I think what you guys are doing is just keeping it open, eliminates that possibility.
Yeah, and I think we even go a step further. We're like at our quarterly company meeting, our COO gets up in front of the whole company and goes through each of our key metrics and explains them to people. Right? People don't necessarily come into HubSpot knowing what does customer acquisition cost mean? What does that mean for our metrics as a company? But so they'll actually go through and explain what everything means and why that connects to the high level missions for the company.
Yeah, that's really good. Is there? You mentioned that you share openly internally. Do you share things externally, or is that just within the team, within the company?
I think we have to balance it out, right? We went public a year and a half ago, roughly, and so there's some stuff that we can't disclose publicly. So obviously we don't disclose that publicly, right? There's stuff that there's strategy and stuff that we wouldn't want to just be out there, but I think we share openly externally as much as we can, because we believe in, like we said before, content is king. So we share a lot of our own marketing team's tricks on our marketing blog. We share a lot of our own products team's philosophy on our product team blog. We really think that by sharing our story and sharing the lessons that we learn, will attract great customers and will attract great employees. Yeah,
absolutely. And I bet you've been a reader of your marketing blog for a while now. And I think that's fantastic. All the information that you guys put out there, it's like you give away your secrets a lot of times.
Yeah, and and I think the thing is, like, we really think that's best. I think it's and maybe I don't know, it can sound sort of naive to say, but it's sort of the right thing to do. It's the inbound way, I guess, is what we would say.
Yeah, definitely. All right, the next one is probably the one that I want to spend the most time on. Is we favor autonomy and take ownership.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that.
So this is huge. I think there's a lot of I think this is right, and this culture code is shared across all departments in our company. But I think that this really hits home for me in engineering and in product, where like I was saying before, how our teams have really full ownership over a vertical slice of our product, which is oftentimes, at the level of ambition of an entire company. And so we really think that giving people that autonomy and that real ownership invests them so much more in the work they're doing, that not only are they going to work harder at it, but they're going to be immensely more fulfilled in their day-to-day.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I've seen. The more freedom you give someone to make decisions about things and to run it as if it's their own, the more they feel like it is their own, the more proud they're going to be of whatever they're creating. And honestly, the more they're going to put into it and the better they're going to feel about what they create.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we say from our leadership team is, they provide not necessarily direct. They never provide direct directions to teams. They're not doing a command and control kind of thing. They provide what we call guardrails. So they'll say, to fit into the larger business strategy, your team is going to work on a product that solves this problem for customers. But then it's left to that team to flesh out that problem and discover and iterate and execute on that.
So how important is the second part of that sentence, is to take ownership?
I mean, I think it's incredibly important. So, like, for example, we don't have a dedicated QA or operations team for any of our apps. And so that means that when you're creating code, when you're creating software here, you really own it, right? If something goes wrong in the middle of the night, it's your phone that's ringing to fix the problem. It's not a throw it over the wall kind of thing. It's we really want people to feel like they own it. And I think the flip side of that too is that, we don't have any policies around, say, code review or testing or deployment. While I'm on the phone with you right now, I could deploy nearly any app at HubSpot from my laptop, without permission. But we give everyone that freedom and that level of control, knowing that it'll mean that assuming we hire the right people and help onboard them in the right way, it'll mean they're so much more invested.
Okay, and as a software development manager, that kind of makes me a little bit nervous that anybody can deploy anything at any time, and that the QA is done kind of within the team itself is also kind of makes me nervous. But what kind of results have you guys seen taking a unique approach like this?
I mean, I think that the biggest one is just unbelievable velocity, right? The rate at which we can get software in front of customers is just blisteringly fast. And I think I think you pointed out a very valid concern, which is, are we creating a culture of recklessness, perhaps?
Yeah.
But I think the thing is, as people own it, right? Because people really own it, because they're on the pagers, because they've talked to customers and they know the impacts that the changes they're making are having. People are really invested in doing the right thing. So maybe that means that your code has to pass a really complicated test suite if you have hundreds of thousands of people using it every time you do a deploy. If you're developing something totally new, right, it doesn't really make sense necessarily to write a really complete test suite because we're not sure if we're solving the right customer problems yet.
Oh, yeah, good point.
And then I think the other piece of that is that we take this philosophy where we say our mean time to restoration is more important than our mean time between failures. So we would rather have software that breaks sometimes and we know there's a problem immediately and can deploy a fix incredibly quickly than to say, we're going to build software that never fails. Because I think even when you try to build software that never fails, it still fails.
Right. It's impossible. There's always going to be a bug somewhere that you didn't catch.
Right.
So when you say take ownership, I guess that's not something you really have to teach, right? If you just give them the true autonomy, that the ownership part's just going to fall in line. Is that what you guys seen, or do you have like some kind of policy or method or training that kind of helps people understand the ownership that they're supposed to be taking?
I think it starts with our technical leads who they're responsible at the end of the day. They're responsible for the execution on their team, and so oftentimes, right, they'll set technical direction on their team, and they'll sort of, they have the primary ownership on the team, and they'll give that ownership to members of the team and sort of pass around that ownership based on the experience on the team. So, right, when someone comes in brand new, even if they're brilliant, right, it takes a while to understand how does an organization work, right? What are, what are the software, standards that we use? What does our stack look like? And then, how do I, if I want to introduce something new, who do I talk to? That kind of thing. So, and if you give someone like that full autonomy right away, you're not setting them up for success. You're not setting up the company for success. And so I think we leave it in our tech leads' hands to figure out within their team, how do you divvy up that ownership, and how do you help people grow? So I think there is a level of training, because I think, if we'll hire people who have come from organizations where that's not the case, and there's a lot of asking permission, can I do this? Can I do this? And and we want to make sure that people know, right? Yes, you can do this. Let's have a conversation about whether or not you should.
Right. Very, very good. So when you're talking about your teams having, so much autonomy, how large are your teams typically?
So they're usually about 6 people. I think is what we say is our ideal. Some are a little smaller, some are a little bigger.
Okay. And what, autonomy is such a vague word, and I've used it a lot, myself, about different ways you can give autonomy, whether it's by time, when people work, what they work on, how they work. Where do you guys draw the line on autonomy? Like, what is your scope of autonomy?
I mean, that's a tough one. I mean, I think it's like I said earlier. I think it's really similar to, if you and a few friends who you trust decide to start a company and build software. What does autonomy mean in that sense? It means a lot, right? It's sort of the sky's the limit, I think, on what it means. And I think there's some stuff that we don't have our tech leads generally worry about budget or compensation or that kind of thing. We sort of, fortunately, as a company, we're at a state where those things aren't a concern in our day to day right now.
Right.
But in terms of product direction, in terms of QA process, in terms of nearly everything that's engineering related, we give people the same autonomy they would have if they went and created their own startup.
So it's almost like helping facilitate their entrepreneurial endeavors within the what'd you call it, guide rails or
guardrails.
Yeah. So do you find that that's a challenge for people to get used to?
I think for the right people, it isn't that challenging, because it's sort of you're like, oh well, how else would you want to work, right? Why would you want to work in a place where you can't see the context, and you can't make, or where you feel like you're fighting an uphill battle to get your day-to-day work done because there's not buy-in at some organizational level about a process or a tool or something.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And one of the things that I usually ask audiences when I'm speaking to them is I'll say, who is your favorite boss? And no one has ever said it's the person that was standing over me, micromanaging me, and putting a bunch of stress on me. It was always someone that gives me freedom to make my own choices, yet holds me to high standards.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and even more than that, is there to come in and coach and teach when it is clear that someone is struggling.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the goal of a leader, is to grow their people.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, number 5, we believe our best perk is amazing people.
Yeah, so I think this was we have a lot of great perks at HubSpot. We just opened a new office here in Cambridge. We have a full-time barista who makes just amazing cappuccinos. We have a beer garden. The office is gorgeous. We have a ton of great conference rooms. There's snacks. We have a bunch of after-work events, that kind of thing. And I think it's easy for people to conflate culture with those perks, right? The superficial things that make a place nice to work. Maybe that's catered lunch. Maybe that's your dry cleaning is done in house. That stuff is nice, but at the end of the day, if you're going to work because they're doing your dry cleaning, that's not a reason to work someplace. The reason to work someplace is because you work with really talented, inspiring people who are going to push you to learn and do better and build great stuff.
Yeah, there's a book called The Culture Blueprint by Robert Richmond that I read, that he kind of talked about the same thing, that a lot of people, when they talk about a company with a great culture, they always talk about the perks, but it has nothing to do with the perks that make, those are kind of like the byproduct of having the culture and having the people that are in place that are there. It's not about the ping pong tables and the video games. It's more about the people. So I think that's really cool that you guys pointed that out.
Yeah, and I think we try to be smart about our perks. So for example, the new coffee shop in our office is great, not just because I can have 3 cappuccinos every morning, which I usually do now, but because it's a place where you can, when you're waiting in line, you talk to people. Mm-hmm. It's like has that function of a real coffee shop where you go and break out of your daily routine and strike up conversations, strike up serendipitous interactions. And that's why it's a key part of our culture, not because you're right. Like I can go buy a coffee. It's not about the coffee itself.
Yeah, it's more about the interaction, the relationships that are built while you're there.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else you want to add on that?
I mean, I guess not really. It's I think, but that's. I guess I'll say, for me, that's the reason that I come to work every day. That's the reason that I'm excited to come in. That's the reason that that's what motivates me to work hard is working with a ton of really talented people who are all setting the bar really high for each other, helping each other out, and I think forming really genuine relationships around building great stuff and solving problems for our customers.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. I think that's why you work. You work for the people. I mean, and you want to have great people around you because you're spending so much time with them. It's it makes no sense to work with people that aren't just like you said, amazing.
Yeah, right. Life is too short.
Yeah, and that's number 7. We recognize life is too short, but we'll come back to that one. Number 6 is we dare to be different and question the status quo.
Yeah. So I think we as we grow, I think especially we want to make sure that we're still taking risks, that we're not ever saying, we're doing this because that's the way we've always done it. I think that's part of I think the regressing to the mean that happens in large organizations is that when something is done, it's really easy to just say, oh, we're just going to keep doing stuff the same way we always have, and so we want to look critically. And make sure it's safe and even encouraged to look critically at even the things that we say, that we hold really dear. So maybe that's a technology we're using, right? Mm-hmm. Do we need to? We always are experimenting with new technologies. Is there something that's going to make us more productive? That's going to, let us deliver better code faster? Maybe that's a process, right? How do we interview people? Should we upend that whole process? What does the role of our technical lead mean, right? We have a definition for it that we feel pretty happy with now, but could we restructure that to be better for our employees and better for our teams? Where we try not to hold anything sacred, just for the sake of just because that's the way it is, right? We're always open to change.
And how do you instill that in people? Because it's kind of like a default reaction for people to get into, well, that's the way it always was kind of mentality. And there's people that, that I've worked with for years who, when they first started, they had this idea of change and let's try something new. And then they get set in their ways, and it's really challenging for them to say, well, we should try something different. It's just it just gets hard when you've been doing the same thing for 5-6 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is hard, and I think it's hard. It's hard to break out of your own routines, right? I've noticed that I'll have a routine, like say for example with our weekly tech talks. When we were changing around like the way we schedule it, I'm like, well, I don't think we need to change it because we've always been doing it that way. But then people rightfully so, I think the way it works, people rightfully call each other out on that and say, well, is that really the best thing though, even though it's what we're doing? And I think so. People calling each other out, sort of peer to peer, is a huge part of it. And then even more than that, I think we go out of our way to try to celebrate wins when people do introduce a status quo change that really improves the org. So, for example, one of our developers rolled out Kafka inside their app, which is a sort of a message queuing system to replace. We had built our own task queue system before that, and this guy Ryan thought that Kafka would be a lot faster, and it would be a lot better for the app. It would mean that we could process streaming data a lot faster, and so he just went out and did it, and then gave a tech talk about it, got more people on board, and then eventually, fast forward a year and a half later, it's supported by our platform infrastructure team or by our product infrastructure team, and it's a foundational part of nearly all of our apps at HubSpot. And it wasn't a manager saying, "Hey, let's do this. We've done the analysis on it and believe that this is the right technology choice." It was a person saying, "Hey, we've been doing it this way, but I think if we try out this new thing, it'll be a lot better for everyone," and organically building support for it.
Yeah, that's a great story. So when you roll something out like that and you featured it on the Tech Talk and it had really good success, where do you go from there?
So I think
how do you encourage that behavior repetitively from everyone else?
Well, so I think we gave Ryan a ton of kudos on it. I think it was great for his career in the org. Right, it was celebrated by leadership. It was celebrated by the team, and so I think by lifting people up who say, hey, this person is thinking critically about technology choices and putting in the work to convince people and try to and really moving the whole org forward. And so celebrating those wins, we think hopefully will encourage more people to take those kinds of risks and keep moving the whole org forward.
Yeah, I think that's the right approach and the right way to do it. And the last one on the culture code was we recognize that life is short. How do you recognize that?
I mean, I think it's we want to recognize that people are whole people, right? We never want to think of people as just resources, right? And so we want to make sure that people are, genuinely having fun and feeling fulfilled at work. So that's, and I think some of that is like stuff like is perks, right? We recently got a gym in the office. Everyone has a standing desk. But we also set aside time during the workday, for lunches, for people to interact, for people to really forge relationships. And I think a ton of people in HubSpot, right? They'll hang out with each other after work. Their families know each other, right? Their significant others know each other, and you feel like you're part of something bigger. And I think it means that that's another part of just having the days really be fulfilling.
Yeah, I'm totally on board with that. And I know when I first became a manager, they did the whole routine where take a really a software developer that's doing well, and they bump them up and say, hey, now you're not going to develop software, you're going to manage people, and go that route. I didn't really know how to do it, and I thought putting more time in was what was required. And I think putting time in is the right thing to do, but I was putting it in the wrong place. I wasn't putting it in building relationships and doing the things that matter in the long term. I was putting it in, writing TPS reports or something like that.
Yeah.
And not doing the things that matter. And now that I realize how to do the things that matter and to talk to the people and to build the relationships, I've started to realize how important, that life is short really is. And I've had to set some of my own boundaries so that, I dedicate enough time to my wife and kids outside of work, and I'm not putting in the 80 hours a week, every week kind of thing. And how do you guys go about, helping people to discover that work-life balance?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so we have an unlimited vacation policy, which I think is part of that. But we had a problem actually where people, and I think this is sort of a joke that's on the internet that an unlimited vacation policy means a no vacation policy, because if you're working in an org like HubSpot where everyone's pretty ambitious, pretty motivated, very invested in their work, it's easy to not take vacation. So we had to revise the policy where you have 2 weeks, 2 unlimited vacation. But you have to take at least 2 weeks. So that, I guess that's sort of a fun thing. But I think, our leadership team and our tech leads know that, we're not running a burnout shop here. And if we're getting to the point where people are exhausted and you've been sprinting, not to say that we don't ever have deadlines and we never have to hustle hard to meet them. Mm-hmm. But if that's the way that a team is operating day in and day out, it means that, they don't have enough people on the team, they don't have the resources they need, or they're going about something the wrong way. And so then our leadership team will look, how can we help them? Is it more people? Is it, taking some of the responsibilities off? Is it moving some of maybe the infrastructure work they've been working on into a separate team dedicated to that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think that's really good. And I know some people that work at a company with the no PTO. And one of the interesting things is when they went to that company, that they had 5 weeks before, and they pretty much used up at least 4 of them every year. And then the first 2 years with the no PTO policy, they didn't take any days off. And it's like, well, why not? I don't know. I didn't have that motivation. So I think having that 2 weeks is really, really good. And I heard Richard Branson talking about the no PTO policy, and he said the reason why that they implemented that is because they can't truly track when people are working, because in the past when you left work you didn't have a way to continue to work because we didn't have the technology to do that. But now most people's jobs are critically thinking. Their job is to think, and they're going to be doing that all the time, and they can always stay connected with their mobile devices so you can't track when they're actually working. So why would you bother tracking when they're not?
Yeah, it creates artificial stress that doesn't mean anything. And I think if we, and I think this also goes back to our autonomy and ownership, that if we trust that people really feel that they own the products they're working on, they when it's the right time to go away for a week, and when it's irresponsible.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you should bring your laptop on that vacation or if you should leave it at home too.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That was really amazing. And I'm actually looking at the page right now and I'm going to link it up in the show notes where these slides are. And I see that this is version 16 of this slide deck. And I think the quote right above that's just really important. It says that this culture code is perpetual work in progress. And I was wondering if you could just speak a little bit about the culture that you've seen kind of since you came to HubSpot and kind of where it is now, since you've experienced this huge growth of 300 people to 1,100 now. And where do you see it going from here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we realize is that how Dharmesh is right. This is a perpetual work in progress. Is that the culture is not going to remain static over time, right? You can't take the things about a 20-person company or a 300-person company and freeze them and expect that to scale. So I think we need to reassess things as we grow. So. For example, we were undertaking internationalization as part of our growth. Right? We want to expand to markets outside of the United States, and one way that you could do internationalization, which is sort of I think one of the most obvious ways, is you freeze everything. Right, everyone works on internationalization for a month. Right, it puts in all their strings, refactors all their code. Then you have a big internationalization rollout day. And so we were starting to go down that path, and then we realized, oh, wait a minute, that's not in line with our culture, right? Like that's not how we say we want to do things. That's not delivering incremental progress. And so we had sort of one team build the tools to internationalize, and then they sort of shared that, and it was able to spread organically across the organization the same way that we spread Kafka. And so I think when we come up to these things that are challenges to our culture, right? Maybe it's internationalization, maybe it's some of the compliance issues related to going public. Maybe it's we've just hired 30 people right out of school, and they're not ready to to have the same level of autonomy that we're maybe used to on the teams. It's going to be a huge shock to the system. We think about what's the HubSpot way to do this? How can we approach this challenge in a way that's in line with our culture, even though we know it's going to change what it looks like day to day. Okay,
cool. Is there anything else that you wanted to leave the audience with before we in this session?
I've got to say, this is a big part of my job. If this sounds cool to you, and you could move to Cambridge or Dublin, or you live in one of those cities, please get in touch with us, product.hubspot.com. We're looking for great people who these culture things really resonate with. It's a fantastic place to work, and I would love to meet you.
Yeah, if somebody wants to reach out to you, how can they get in touch with you? Through Twitter or email, or what do you recommend?
Yeah, email is great. I'm Anthony Roldan, A-Roldan at HubSpot, or Twitter, I'm A-Roldan as well.
Okay, and do you mind if I link those up in the show notes?
No, absolutely. Go for it.
All right. Thanks a lot, Anthony. And we'd have to get back together. I want to talk to you more about this position after you've been in the role for maybe another 6 months or so and see how it's progressing and how things are going.
Yeah, I'd love to give you an update. I can't say I'm certain to where it'll be then, but hopefully somewhere even better.
All right. Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And that was Anthony Roldan at HubSpot. Please sure to check out the show notes at ageekleader.com/episode 25 or ageekleader.com/HubSpot.